This is Distant Replay.
Welcome into this mini-sode of the Distant Replay podcast. I am Ben George. He is Mike Noto. We're turning our attention again to true crime for this mini-sode, and we have another good episode upcoming for you. Mike, who are we talking about today?
We're going to go into the case of Chad Curtis. Do you remember Chad Curtis?
A little bit. I think he had a couple highlights, but I know he was a Major League Baseball player that bounced around to a few different teams. So ultimately, I think finishing off with the New York, with the Rangers, but I remember maybe most for the New York Yankees.
Yeah, he's best known for being on the Tigers and the Yankees. Probably his best playing moment on the field, he hit a walk-off home run in Game 3 of the 99 World Series against the Braves. So his roles on those late 90s Yankees teams are probably what people remember him for as far as baseball playing goes. And this is another one of those cases, Ben, where I had not heard about this at all, similar to a lot of the different cases we've done where I know of the athlete, but not basically what they were up to during their career and post-career, and Chad Curtis definitely fits in that category.
Yeah, he does for sure. I'm looking forward to learning more about him because as we found a lot of these episodes, these minisodes, is that these guys we know about them a lot with their career, but they're in the news quite a bit afterwards. That for whatever reason, there's a couple stories about it, but other than that, it doesn't get a ton of attention nationally. So I think people are interested to hear what happens with a lot of these guys afterwards, and it's very eye-opening in many cases, as we've seen with Dave Meggett, which that episode on YouTube especially has blown up on our channel. So if you haven't subscribed over there, do so, and we thank everyone for listening to that episode. But we learned a lot about these guys, so I'm very curious to find out what's going on with Chad Curtis. So as we always do, let's kick it off with learning about kind of his background and his upbringing. So take us through where he's from and kind of how he got to the majors. Yeah,
so he grew up in Michigan and Arizona, went to high school in Arizona, played college baseball in Arizona as well. And then he was a 45th round draft pick. So as you know, guys who get drafted that late in the draft, very unlikely they even reach the major leagues.
Yeah.
But he actually had a pretty quick ascension into the major leagues. And his playing career, I already went through the most identifiable part of his playing career, the home run for the Yankees, right? He was a solid outfielder, sort of fringe starter, platoon type of guy. But his career, which I thought was interesting, was kind of marred by him not getting along with teammates almost at every stop of his career. And that's why I think he had such short stops with each team. Chad Curtis is the kind of guy, Ben, where he looked at himself as the righteous and religious moral authority for everyone he was around. That's the reputation he had in every clubhouse that I researched.
Okay.
The kind of guy that thinks the way he's doing things, the way he's living his life is the right way.
Right.
And if you're not doing things up to his standards, he's going to let you know.
Yeah, it looks down on you, judges you quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, several examples of that during his career, okay? First, do you remember Kevin Mitchell?
Oh, yeah, great player.
So Kevin Mitchell playing during the 97 season with the Indians, playing rap music in the locker room.
Ooh.
Well, righteous Chad can't have that. So he doesn't approve of the lyrics in the rap music. So he gets up, shuts off the stereo in the clubhouse. A fight ensues, which lands Chad Curtis on the disabled list. A couple of weeks later, he's shipped off to the Yankees, okay? That's when he gets traded to the Yankees in June of 97.
Okay.
While he's with the Yankees, this is a story Yankee fans will probably remember, and it's a story I remember. Yankees get into a fight with the Mariners, late 90s Yankees-Mariners rivalry, okay? During that fight, Curtis criticized Derek Jeter for fraternizing with A-Rod during the brawl and not getting involved. Like, he chastised Jeter on the field, then in the locker room, and then to the media. We're talking Derek Jeter in the late 90s here, okay?
Right.
And basically telling Jeter, like, you didn't have our back, you don't know how to play the game. This is like a part-time outfielder chastising Derek Jeter. Late 90s New York Yankees Derek Jeter. So that's how much Chad Curtis thought of himself and how morally superior he thought he was to everyone else, okay?
Right.
I think this example sort of crystallizes it. Then after he hits the home run against the Braves in Game 3 of the 99 World Series, like I mentioned, he tells Jim Gray in a post-game interview on the field, I'm not going to talk to you because as a team, we decided not to talk to you based on how you spoke to Pete Rose. Remember when that controversial?
Remember that. Yeah.
Remember that? Okay. So Curtis says, hey, look, I'm not only not going to talk to you, but as a team, we decided not to talk to you in general because of how you handled Pete Rose.
That was Chad Curtis, huh? I remember. Yeah, definitely remember that whole scandal. Like, remember the interview. Then I remember like people kind of, I guess, protesting him a little bit. But I didn't realize it was Curtis is kind of the root of that.
Yeah, and then Torre after the game, Joe Torre, the manager of the Yankees, of course, was like, "We didn't come to that agreement as a team at all. Chad did that on his own."
He like lived in his own kind of world, right?
He's no self-awareness whatsoever, right? This is the kind of guy we're dealing with, and it becomes a major theme sort of playing career and post-playing career. All these issues kind of culminate in that period with the Rangers that you mentioned, where again he has issues with. Remember Royce Clayton?
Oh yeah,
issues with his rap music and the lyrics. He has issues with his teammates for watching the Jerry Springer show, which if you can't find Jerry Springer sort of entertaining, sometimes. That probably says a little bit about you,
I love that. I love that he would get on to Jeter about not going to chapel. Like,
he got on exactly. He got on Jeter about like the way he was living his life too. I forgot to mention that's a very good point.
What do you think about? He thought about the Jeter gift baskets. You think he approved of that?
I don't think Chad. I think Chad Curtis though. He wanted, if you were in his life, he wanted you to run it by him though to make sure it was okay with him before he did anything. That's what it sounds like Chad Curtis was like.
Yeah,
but. Again, he's chastising teammates now in Texas at the end of his career for missing church, watching Jerry Springer, listening to rap, and eventually I think he wore out his welcome there and his playing career's end. Okay, again, kind of guy, doesn't drink alcohol, doesn't use curse words, loyal to his wife, and he makes sure everyone knows this. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to not drink alcohol or use curse words or be loyal to your wife, but then when you try to get everyone else around you to be like that, just because you think it's the superior way to live life, it's a little bit eye-opening.
Yeah.
All right. So post-career, he's married with 6 children. He moves back to Michigan, gets his teaching certificate. From 2002 to 2011, so roughly a decade, he holds positions at different schools in Michigan. He's a physical education teacher. He's the athletic director at a small Christian school. So it sounds like a guy, hey, look, he made almost $13 million in his career. Post-career, he just kind of wants to do a job that he likes,
right.
that he enjoys.
Maybe help influence people.
He's afforded the luxury to do that because he's made $13 million. So now in 2011, the 2010-2011 school year, he starts a position at Lakewood High School, which is also a school that his daughters are attending, sort of simultaneously here. He's a substitute teacher and a volunteer coach in the weight room. And he's also the coach of the equestrian team, which his daughters are on. So we have a guy now sort of getting his footing at the school, developing his reputation, and his time volunteering as a coach in that weight room we'll get to here in a second. But before the 2012 football season, like early in the year 2012, he was going to be the head coach of their football team, the high school's football team for the 2012-2013 season. So this all builds up to May 2012. Curtis abruptly resigns from his positions with the Lakewood Public Schools, right? Again, this is a school where he was going to be the football coach the following year.
So things are going well, and all of a sudden he steps away. This is never a good sign.
Yeah, on the surface, like things are going well, right? And then in very short order, so the allegations come out before he resigns, but they're in full swing once he resigns.
Okay.
So this resignation was more of a response to the allegations. He is accused of inappropriately touching female students at the high school, again, when he was in this role as volunteer weight training coach.
Right.
When he's first asked about, the allegations from a reporter, and if you want some good information on, I'll mention some sources here, but Wood TV8 is the NBC affiliate for Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids, Michigan, did a good job covering this story because it was local to them. He got confronted by a reporter about the allegations, and he said, quote, "I don't believe I touched anyone inappropriately." Right there, that's a red flag to me.
Yeah, that's not very...
You don't believe you touched anyone inappropriately.
Not much conviction behind that statement.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So in June, he's ordered to stand trial on 5 counts of sexual misconduct. And in August, after another victim comes forward, a 6th count gets added on. So just to be clear, there's 3 alleged victims accounting for these 6 counts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now remember, this all happens between May and August of 2012. All right. He's ordered to stand trial. His criminal trial begins in August of 2013. And this is where the 3 victims and 2 others testify in court. And we've done some cases like this before, Ben, but I'm always amazed by like the courage and strength of these victims to get up there and sort of detail what happened to them.
Right.
And basically what they outline is Curtis used to give massages to only some female athletes when he was in the role of weight training coordinator or whatever he was. In the weight room, then he did the massages in a weight room, then in a room next to the weight room, and then finally like in a windowless training room. That's where these massages took place. The two alleged victims, both 15 years old, accused him of inappropriately touching, their breast and buttocks area. And then another 16-year-old student alleged that in 2011, he penetrated them with his finger. Awesome, yeah. He penetrated her with his finger. So some pretty graphic stuff. And he was like on and off, like text messaging these students, sort of having relationships with them that could be viewed as kind of inappropriate for his standing. Like something like over 100 text messages exchanged between him and these 15, 16-year-old students.
Yeah.
So those 3 victims testified in court that that's what he did to them.
Okay.
Then also 2 others not related to the charges also testified. And these were 2 of his daughter's teammates, like travel softball teammates. And you know how these travel softball teams will travel to like, away tournaments and they'll stay in hotels?
Yeah.
All right. So they allege that during one of their softball trips, all right, basically Chad Curtis came into their room, got into bed with one of the 14-year-old teammates and started basically, for lack of a better way to put it, making advances to her underneath the covers, like trying to feel her up, okay, Jeez. And put his hands in her pants and stuff like that. The girl moves away. The other girl is a witness to this. She's in the room. She's her roommate.
So he has the gall to do this while someone else is in the room too.
In the room.
Jeez.
They both confront him about it, like, what are you doing? He basically tells them, hey, look, the only way I'm going to get in trouble for this is if you report me. Please don't report me. I'm really sorry. Right? We see this a lot.
Yeah.
Like with cases we do where, you sort of put the victim in an impossible situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of courage to come forward, and they eventually came forward to their credit and reported this. But he puts them in a situation where like, hey, look, my daughter's your friend. I don't want my life to be ruined. I don't want her life to be ruined. Please don't report me. But again, they obviously came forward. So you have the 3 victims, the 2 others testifying in court to his actions. This is a quick trial. It's a 3-day trial. Okay. The result of the 3-day trial is he's found guilty on all 6 counts. Now, this is where things get even more strange.
Okay.
Right?
Why?
So Curtis, as we mentioned before, very religious, going back to his playing days, and very, thinks he's on a more of a moral high ground than everyone around him. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to make clear the fact that he's religious doesn't matter to me. Like it's not bad to be religious. Right. But the moral authority part of Chad Curtis really shows here. Have you ever seen a trial where after the verdict's announced, the person who's on trial can address the court?
Yeah, like the judge gives them an opportunity to maybe apologize or give a message to the family, maybe provide a little closure.
Exactly, Ben. It's usually more of a, hey, I apologize, or hey, I didn't do this, but I feel bad for the victims. Like sort of, and it's usually pretty short.
It's like we now know what you've done. What do you have to say about it?
Exactly. Well, he goes the complete other way. He has a very strange, almost hour-long address to the court in which he essentially says he's a man of faith, the girls are completely lying, and that he was actually the one rebuffing their advances, and starts rambling on and on and on with these being the major themes for an hour. Okay. And you could actually see some of this rambling. They covered it for the local news station and it's on YouTube. Not the whole hour, but you can see it. And it's very strange. I mean, he's there in a jumpsuit, looks exactly like when he played. If you remember, he had like the flat top, sort of high and tight haircut, right? Still looking the same, just with shackles on and a jumpsuit, going into this whole diatribe for almost an hour. Everyone is taken aback by this. The judge, the lawyers involved say they've never seen it before. even the TV reporters on like their TV report interject. No one of those guys are like straight on the facts, right? The reporters.
Yeah.
Like they're even interjecting about how it was very strange. And basically when you go back and research this case, this post-trial, post-conviction speech he gave or address he gave to the court is always mentioned. That's how weird it was. Okay.
Jeez.
Still denying everything he did.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Right.
In October 2013, again, a couple months later, he's sentenced to 7 to 15 years in prison. He tries to appeal those charges in 2015. He loses his appeal 3-0, and his conviction is upheld. All right.
Okay. So the criminal case is done. Charges have been laid down. A lot of times these things go to civil trials. Does that happen here too?
It does. Yeah. So this went to a very, very public civil trial as well. So to set the scene for the civil trial, a fourth victim came forward. Okay. They're now involved in the civil trial as well. Civil actions are brought against the school district and Chad Curtis. First with the school district. The bombshell that comes out here in the civil trial is that a Board of Education member who was friends with Curtis, he knew Curtis through his church somehow, said that Curtis, way back in May of 2012, when these allegations come out, the guy basically went to Curtis and said, hey, did you do this? Curtis told him that he admitted to kissing one of the girls and touching them inappropriately.
There we go.
There we go, right? It's the cover-up, always with these. I'm amazed by the cover-up. And he didn't report that conversation to authorities. This board member did not report it to authorities. And this is a major bombshell for the school district. I mean, this leads to the principal resigning, the superintendent resigning, boards of, members of the Board of Education resigning, a whole big fallout. It leads to a lot of problems in the community with trust of the school system, as you could imagine, and so on. So they win the lawsuit against the school districts, the civil lawsuit. Then it goes to a civil case against Chad Curtis. All four win the civil trial against Chad Curtis as well. During this, the backdrop of all this, in between the 2 or 3 years between the conviction and the civil trials, is, these victims, there's people in that community that believe Chad Curtis. Okay.
Still.
And they still believe him. And these victims were, victims again of harassment by people in the community. Then of course there's people on the other side who believe the victims. So it just created a lot of friction within this Michigan community. And lastly, to kind of put a bow on the civil trial, is Curtis and his wife tried to pull a fast one and transfer, now his ex-wife, by the way, but they tried to pull a fast one and transfer all the assets that he had into her name as a way to not have to pay out the civil suit.
Jeez.
Well, what these two geniuses don't realize is that their conversations are being recorded. And so now, obviously,
was that happening while he was in jail?
I did not get clarification on that one outside. It must have been
because of the recording conversations.
Yeah. So these, exactly. That's a good point.
Hey, before the divorce happens, will you go in and just transfer everything to your name?
Yeah.
And she's
on
probably
a recorded prison line.
And she's probably like, hey, I mean, this is probably the only thing I have left to get out of this relationship at this point. I mean, after hearing all this, like, hey, am I going to now leave this relationship with nothing because all the money is now being paid off? Not that that's, not that she's like trying to push away the victims, more or less like, I'm going to be left with nothing after all this. And also on top of this failed marriage and everything that's come out during this case.
Yeah. She takes it one step further and tries to declare bankruptcy as another way to not have to pay the victims out. And she's called out on that as well by a court. Like her application for bankruptcy is like denied basically. So that's how the civil trial ends. Now, remember back when I told you he was sentenced to, 7 to 15 years. Mm-hmm. He ends up serving 7 years, and he was actually paroled in September of this year. And now he's on
of 2020.
He was. Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that we're recording this early in 2021. He was paroled on September 22nd, 2020. So he is currently not incarcerated. He serves his 7 years. But again, one of these stories where I didn't know this stuff about Chad Curtis. Not that he's as high profile as some of the other athletes we've gone through, but this is a guy who relatively recently, ravaged the whole community with his actions. And it's good to see in this case he was held accountable. And just based on how he tried to be this moral high ground guy his whole life and how he ended up, I'm sure there's a lot of people who didn't get along with him over the years that are not either A, too surprised with how things ended for him, or B, don't really feel too bad for him.
Yeah, that's pretty, man, what a story. It's always the cover up, Mike. The board member not saying anything, and then, all that happening, which things could have been prevented potentially had action been taken when the first stuff kind of came to light.
Yep. And I mentioned that Wood TV, the local news station, did a very good job of covering this. They have multiple news stories. They have multiple videos on YouTube you can watch. They also, the Detroit News did a story on how the community basically fell apart. This is more in line with the civil trial a couple years later, and how the case sort of still says, the headline of the article is ex-Tigers sex case hangs over Western Michigan community, sort of a look into the charges and how, it impacted him, his family, and everyone around him. So,
right.
Some good sources out there if you want to learn more. Look, as long as you guys keep listening to these, we'll keep on bringing them to you. The response to these has been great on YouTube lately. And, we thank everyone a lot for subscribing and listening.
So that'll do it for this mini-sode of the Distant Replay Podcast. Again, I'm Ben George. He is Mike Noto. Find us online at distantreplaypodcast.com. On Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube, you'll find all of our episodes, full episodes, along with these mini-sodes, more true crime on there as well, wherever it is you listen. So we appreciate it. As always, we'll talk to you again soon.